If you ever see yourself in the mirror and you begin to hear your judgments of what you see, because you're not living up to that image of what a man or what a woman is, that image of success or beauty or whatnot, that sting, that is your judgment, that is what domestication is. I'm using that image that doesn't exist to use it to go against me, to reject myself, to punish myself. And that is exactly what conditional love is. The result of all the conditioning we've had in our life to say, I am not worthy of love. In this case, I'm using the four agreements. Like I said before, the telltale sign that you're using the four agreements as an instrument of domestication is judging yourself for taking things personal, judging yourself for the rest of it. And here's the thing, I can't give what I do not have. If I have that self-judgment within me, of that self-domestication within me, then that's all I'm going to give.
Welcome my guest, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. He is the son of Don Miguel Ruiz Sr., the author of the best-selling book, The Four Agreements. Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., at the age of 14, apprenticed with his father and his grandmother. From that early age, he was called upon to translate his grandmother's prayers, lectures, and workshops from Spanish to English. When he reached his mid-20s, his father intensified his training. And now for the past 12 years, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. has applied the lessons learned from his father and grandmother to define and enjoy his own personal freedom while achieving peace with all of creation. He has written 5 best-selling books sharing the wisdom and tools from the family's tradition. The 5 Levels of Attachment, Living a Life of Awareness, The Mastery of Self, and the Don Miguel Ruiz Little Book of Wisdom. He has also co-authored the book, The 7 Secrets to Healthy, Happy Relationship with his dear friend, Heather Ashamara. He now helps others discover optimum physical and spiritual health through his books so that they may achieve their own personal freedom. So welcome again, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. This is such an honor. Like I said, when I booked this interview with you, I almost fell off my chair because I was just so excited to share this space with you. I respect your family's work so much. I've read many of the books. Of course, the common one that they probably already heard your name in passing. They're like, oh, that sounds familiar. And there's a reason why, because your father, Don Miguel Ruiz, wrote probably one of the best-selling books of all time. I believe there's over 9 million copies sold in the US and 48 different languages translated in, and it's still a best-selling book, and it's The Four Agreements. So yes, probably everybody listening to this episode right now, I would say, I'm going to give a guess. 60% has read The Four Agreements. So you are the son of Don Miguel Ruiz, and you share the Toltec tradition with so many others in your books, which we're going to talk about some of them today. This is The Mastery of Self, which we're going to focus on. And then your newest book, which I'm super excited to dig into, The 7 Secrets of Healthy, Happy Relationships, which was also with my other favorite author, Heather Ashamara. So anyways, welcome. I'm so happy.
Erica, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's an honor, and I'm very grateful to you for the opportunity to share my family tradition with you.
So amazing. Well, let's begin there, because your family tradition is called the Toltec tradition or wisdom, whichever way you like to say it. So for those that aren't familiar what the Toltec tradition is, can you share what it is? And then also, where did this tradition start from?
Sure. Well, the word Toltec is a Nahuatl word that in English means artist. If I translate the phrase, the Toltec art of transformation, into 100% English, it means the artist path of transformation. I am an artist, and the canvas for my work of art is my life. And the instruments I'm going to use to create that work of art is going to be my body, it's going to be my mind, it's going to be my intent, my will, my choice, my yes and my no. These instruments that allow me to, with every choice I make, to put in a paint stroke in my work of art. And it changes continuously. I can create the most perfect nightmare or the most harmonious dream. And with every choice I make, the dream and the work of art changes continuously and flowing between the two. So the Toltec tradition or philosophy or lineage, whichever word we want to use here, is predicted on that concept of this is the work of art, which is my life as an artist, as a Toltec. I am the creator of the work of art that I'm going to live, the story of my life. Where does it come from? Well, as a culture, it existed over 500 years ago, and it ended with either the expansion of the Aztec Empire or the expansion of the Spanish Empire. According to oral tradition, it started around the time of Teotihuacan, and the descendants of Toltecs created Tula and many other communities across central Mexico. With the expansion of the Aztec Empire, with the expansion of the Spanish Empire, it ceased to exist as a culture or as a civilization. And from there, it became an oral tradition. The people, the descendants of the people who were part of that community began to share it. And you can almost say that there's Toltecs all across Mexico in different ways. And when I say Toltecs, I'm saying there's many artists across the whole world. So if you see it from that point of view, every community has an artist. But in regards to the Toltec tradition and the culture in Mexico, there are different groups of people across Mexico that teach it in the way it used to be, exactly as it was 500 years ago. And then there's groups of people who teach it with each generation, it gets impacted by such. That's my family. My family comes from that generation. So in my family, as far as living memory goes, my father, his mother, Madre Sarita, her father, Don Leonardo, his father, Don Ezequiel Macias, and I don't know the name of Don Ezequiel's parents, but what I know is that Don Ezequiel is the one that says that we are Eagle Knights of the Toltec lineage. It's his word. And you can also say he's the first Mexican in the family because his parents were born in La Nueva España, in the New Spain, and they consider themselves subject to the king. And Don Ezequiel is the first generation to be born into that new world, which is the Mexico at the time. And he was the one who taught the tradition in his own unique way, you know, that old traditional Mexican with the big hat and the trickster of a shaman. Wow, that was him. You know, if you ever see the movie The Milagro Pinfield War, he looks like that gentleman that plays the trickster in that movie. He told stories, and those stories went down through generations. And he, according to legend, lived to be 116 years of age. His son was born in 1883, and he was a military soldier. And he taught the tradition through music. He shared Don Ezequiel's stories, but he had that discipline. He rebelled against the tradition. He became a soldier, but he became a musician and the orchestra leader of a military band. So he found a way. Now, these two gentlemen, Don Ezequiel and Leonardo, still had to deal with the taboo of the Holy Inquisition in Mexico. So it was kind of taboo to teach anything of Catholicism outside. If you taught the old ancient ways, it was kind of considered taboo. So they wouldn't really teach too many people outside the family. Even within the family, they would just select certain few people. And that was until my grandmother, Don Leonardo's daughter, Madre Sarita, she had a aha moment. She rebelled against the tradition in her own unique way. She had an aha moment when she was close to death and someone took her to see a faith healer, and she was so grateful that she went to Don Leonardo and began her apprenticeship with him and the Quinto Sol in Mexico City, and began to practice the Toltec tradition through faith healing. There, she had such a gratitude for her own healing that she began to practice it and decided to share it with the whole community. Now, they're all from Juanacatlan, Jalisco, a small little town outside of Guadalajara. That's where they on her family side. And in the late 1930s, Mexican President Lázaro Cárdenas went to Tijuana, saw that there wasn't much of a Mexican cultural presence there. It was all geared toward tourism. So he puts in a presidential decree or whatever, and he decides to send a military band to play traditional classic Mexican music there in that part of the world, in that part of Tijuana. And that's how that band, led by my grandfather, moved to Tijuana and eventually San Diego. And that's how we found ourselves there. And that the reason why that's important is because when my grandmother went there, she was in that desire to share the tradition outside the family. And having moved to San Diego, California, she opened a small little temple called Nueva Vida there in what we now know as Barrio Logan in San Diego, California. And she began to teach the Toltec tradition to the community that was there. Every Thursday, every Sunday, she would give her sermons, but during Monday through Friday, she would do her faith healings. The reason why I mention this is because it is she who has the decision to break that taboo and share it with everyone. She became the first woman to practice faith healing for the state of California. This is in the 1970s in a place called Casa Hogar in San Isidro. And the state paid her to be a faith healer. And she shared her tradition in that way. In 2007, she was inducted into the San Diego Women's Hall of Fame as a recognition for her work in keeping that tradition alive, because she decided to share with everyone. And that's how she began to be known, not just known in the Barrio Logan community, but outside of it. People would come from all over, and people who spoke English started listening to what she had to say. Mind you, she spoke no English, only Spanish. So she always had to start having translators for her. That'll come, in fact, later. Her son, Don Miguel Ruiz, also rebelled against his tradition. He became a medical doctor, a medical surgeon. He also had an aha moment that he couldn't explain, and he went to the people he trusted, which is Don Leonardo and Madre Sarita. And that's when they began to teach him dreaming and what we know as ensueño. And he let go of his medical practice sometime in 1985, 86, and he began to teach the tradition there. And he started in Barrio Logan. A coffee shop called Por Vida is now there in that same location. But his main desire there was to clean the Toltec tradition from a lot of the superstition and put it in words that he considered common sense. You can almost say it's the mixture of the old ancient traditions with Western medicine and science. And he just brought it together in that way. And that's where the Four Agreements were born in the way that we all know it. You know, in the book, the Four Agreements, the only thing that really remains of Don Ezequiel's old stories is the story of the smoky mirror in the introduction. That's a Don Ezequiel story, or a story he would tell through the generations. Is it really his story? I don't know. Where did he learn it from? I don't know. But I was born in 1975, not in the 1800s. From that point of view, my father was trying to bridge that old tradition and put it in a language it can resonate with all of us. And that's the secret to the Four Agreements success. My apprenticeship came exactly at that moment of transition, that moment where my father began all that cleaning up, all that processing, all those years as a shaman. And I was 14 years old, and my father had me work with my grandma Sarita, mi abuelita Sarita. And my job was to translate for her because she didn't speak any Spanish. So I translated for her for 10 years. And that was the gist of my apprenticeship for all those years, teaching her, learning her prayers, her meditations, even faith healing to a certain point. But she taught me all these things at the essence, and its root was faith. Faith in oneself. Faith in your capacity to help heal. And then when I graduated from college, my father came in and really began to apprentice. You know, he really began to push. And little by little, I began to understand the whole tradition in my own unique way, because I also rebelled against it. Of course, that's a tradition in the family to rebel against it. But when I was able to apply it in life and the consequences began to teach me, that's when the Toltec tradition became alive.
Mm.
To paraphrase my grandmother, or to quote her actually, if you practice the Toltec tradition the way I do, or your father does, you're killing the tradition, because all you're doing is repeating like a parrot what we're saying.
Mm.
You're going to do it in your own way, because when you apply it, life will reflect back those lessons through the consequences of your choices, through the actions of your words. And that is going to be how you learn the tradition.
Mm.
And that's how the essence of my family does it. You know, we learn the lessons, the stories, the legends, the concepts, and it will have the color of the teacher that taught us, my grandma Sarita and Don Miguel Ruiz in my case. We apply it in the world, and little by little, it begins to have our own voice because we're speaking from our own experience.
Mm.
And that's the essence of the Toltec tradition as a teacher or as a practicing individual, I guess you could say that, of how we apply that lessons in life. And those lessons really help us not just to understand life, but to understand ourselves. To be the master of self is the moment you no longer pretend to be something you are not. You accept yourself just the way you are at this very moment in time.
I love that. Thank you for going into depth about that, because it's beautiful to know where it really came from and how it evolved. And as you speak about that, I mean, you're author of the books that you have written are, let me remember, the the 5 levels of attachment, the mastery of self, as we're talking about living a life of awareness, and then the newest one, the 7 secrets to a healthy, happy relationship. So these are obviously co-written with other authors, as such your father and then Heather Ashmara. So it comes like it's partly your view of how you are able to express it in the book, as well as the other authors, which I think is really amazing. So I love how you say that the Toltec tradition is how you evolve by the lessons learned in your own life. And I think that's beautiful. So the mastery of self, I am fascinated with mastering myself. That is my goal in life. And that's obviously what I want to help others do as well. So I would love to kind of break down this book, because there's a lot shared in it. But one of those things that you kind of talk about is the rebelling against what you're taught or a tradition. And so you talk about this idea of domestication, and it's not commonly talked about in books, to be honest. It's not, when you hear domesticated, you wouldn't think that has to do with how we evolve in life. So if you could go into what does domestication mean in the form of what you talk about in this book, and what does that look like?
Sure. Well, the root problem that we face in each one of the books, not just my own, but my family's books in general, is domestication, which is a system of reward and punishment by which we model the behavior of an individual. If you live up to an expectation, you're worthy of a reward. And if you fall short of that expectation, you're worthy of the punishment. And since we are emotional beings who experience the full spectrum of our emotions, when we live up to the expectation and we get that reward, it feels like acceptance, which feels like love. And the punishment feels like rejection, and the lack thereof of love is the way we've learned to love conditionally. I love you if you live up to my expectation. You can say that there's a word called conditioning as well. And the funny thing about it is that sometimes when people talk about domestication, they say, you domesticate a dog, you domesticate a cat, you can't domesticate humans.
Right.
But the thing is that conditioning and domestication are exactly the same thing. In fact, we just create the hierarchy because I cannot be the same as a dog or an animal. And we already create a sense of hierarchy, which is the result of domestication. I love myself if I live up to expectation. And part of that is we create a hierarchy. But in that hierarchy of I am better than, I am correct, and I'm not wrong, it's because I am worthy of the reward. And if I'm wrong, I'm worthy of the punishment. And I can't be wrong. So I will have to always work to get it right. Domestication can be worked like this. Hello, my name is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. I don't take things personal. I don't make assumptions. I always do my best. I forgot the fourth agreement. Oh no, how can I call myself Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. if I don't know the four agreements? And there's the downward spiral judging me for not living up to this image of perfection that is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., who doesn't take things personal, doesn't make assumptions, always does his best, and he's impeccable with his word. Thank you very much. Those are the four agreements. If I live up to that image of that Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., then I'm worthy of my acceptance. I'm worthy of love. I'm worthy of whatever image or reward I get. But if I don't live up to that image and forget one of the four agreements or the fifth agreement, be skeptical but learn to listen, oh no, and there's the downward spiral all over again, judging myself. When we judge ourselves for not living the four agreements, at that moment, we're using the four agreements as an instrument of domestication, thus corrupting the four agreements and turning them into the four conditions of our personal freedom. We say we're still practicing the four agreements, but we're not. We're practicing the four conditions, even though we're calling it the same thing. And the telltale sign is because we're judging ourselves for that. If I'm taking things personal, oh my gosh, how can I call myself? We judge ourselves, kind of the same way that to say for me, for example, let's say that the perfect version of myself is to be 27 years old, weigh 170 pounds, and have hair like my brother Jose, which if you ever see it, is beautiful, long, all flowing, it's gorgeous. But I look at myself in the mirror and that's just not the truth. I weigh 190 pounds. I am 45 years old, and this is the truth of my hair. So if I look at myself in the mirror and I see that I'm not living up to that image of perfection that I stated before, with the qualities I stated before, then I'm going to start judging myself, rejecting myself. And I'm going to say, you fat, you bald fat, you old bald fat. And that diatribe of judgment, if you ever see yourself in the mirror and you begin to hear your judgments of what you see, because you're not living up to that image of what a man or what a woman is, that image of success or beauty or whatnot, that sting, that is your judgment, that is what domestication is. I'm using that image that doesn't exist to use it to go against me, to reject myself, to punish myself. And that is exactly what conditional love is. The result of all the conditioning we've had in our life to say, I am not worthy of love. In this case, I'm using the four agreements. Like I said before, the telltale sign that you're using the four agreements as an instrument of domestication is judging yourself for taking things personal, judging yourself for the rest of it. And here's the thing, I can't give what I do not have. If I have that self-judgment within me, of that self-domestication within me, then that's all I'm gonna give. Imagine my wife standing right here. Honey, you're Mrs. Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Here's the four agreements, read it. Oh no, honey, how embarrassing, you're taking things personally. You didn't read the book. Oh honey, you're making assumptions. I only hang out with people who are impeccable with their own word. At that moment, I'm judging her. I'm punishing her for agreements she never made, but I'm forcing her to make those agreements through the judgment. And that's what a judgment is. It's an instrument we use to impose that system of domestication with people around us, because that's what we're doing within ourselves. And it's the way we corrupt not just Don Miguel Ruiz and the Toltec tradition, but it's the way we corrupt Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Heather Ashamara, Jesus, Buddha, Siddhartha, Muhammad, psychology, psychiatry, Alcoholics Anonymous, music, fashion, culture, gender. We have all these images that we say we have. As soon as I live up to this image, I'm worthy of love, and if I don't, then I'm worthy of my own rejection. So you can say, to a certain extent, we are the result of our domestication. Put on the clothes you know your friends will make fun of you for. Admit to them that you like certain types of music or that you voted for someone. And if you already know what those things are, then you're hearing your domestication in your own life.
So being that so many of us come from some sort of domestication, because when we grow up, we are domesticated by our parents in some regard, right?
Mhm.
So how do we break free of that? If we know that is a problem, that causes us to have these detachments from our authentic self, how do we eliminate these ideas of domestication, and how could we transform so that we're more attached to our authentic self?
Sure. Well, a moment of clarity without any action is just a thought that passes in the wind. But a moment of clarity followed by action becomes a pivotal moment in our life. It is the moment we become aware. Now, here's the thing. Like you suggested in a question, yes, our parents domesticated us, our society domesticated us, but our friends also domesticated us, the people in our lives. For example, when we go to school, in elementary, middle school, junior high, high school, whatever, we're surrounded by other kids who are also domesticated. And what happens when we learn a behavior, we begin to share it with all around us, with everyone. And we domesticate ourselves with this way. If you live up to my expectation, you're cool. And if you're cool, your reward is you're going to have popularity. But if you don't live up to that expectation, not only will you not be cool and you won't have popularity, you're going to get ostracized for being a square, a nerd, a geek. And we're going to judge you continuously until you live up to our expectations. Now, here's the thing. We are a culture that we are a people that love community. In fact, the reason why people domesticate us is because we love them. Otherwise, we wouldn't be domesticated by them. We want to be a part of this group, and in order to fit in, we will conform to that world. So when someone rejects us, like we got in high school or elementary school or middle school, got rejected by the jocks and the cheerleaders, then we'll say, forget you, jock, forget you, cheerleader, I'm going to hang out with the goth kids. That's what I did. And with us, the rules was we dressed in black, we listened to the Depeche Mode, the Cure, and the Smiths. And if you listen to the right music, you're cool, man. Not their cool, but our cool. But even then, there's rules. Don't listen to Bob Marley. Don't listen to hip hop. Don't listen to country. If you do, then you're a wannabe. You're a sellout, or the worst one, you're a poser. Oh, Nicole the poser was the worst. But if you see that, we create that within the subculture, but not just with the goth kids in my case, but with the hip hop kids, with the preppies, with the geeks, with everyone, the nerds, and all, everyone creates their own sense of what is cool and what is not. And we get so hurt if they do that. We can say we can result of those domestication, and then it leads up to romance. I love you if you live up to that image of whatever person we imagine was the perfect man, the perfect woman. And we compared every person we were in relationship with to that person, and we judged them whenever they did not. I love you if you live up to that image of beauty or success or masculinity or femininity or whatnot, or cool or not cool, or then we start domesticating ourselves that. And the motivator continuously in all of them is love. I love you if. At that moment, it's the corruption of love. It's what we know as conditional love. The motivator that drives you to become something you're not for the sake of being loved. Now, here's the thing. Yes, someone domesticated us in our life. Someone judged us. Someone made fun of us. Someone said this. You're not a good person if you do this. You're not a cool person if you don't do that. Peer pressure comes in mind there. Here's the thing. The image I usually have, and this is in the Mastery of Self, is the image of this. Imagine me at the age of 8, and I'm learning how to assert myself. To assert myself simply means that I'm learning to say yes and no with confidence. And I'm losing the fear of saying no. In fact, it feels good to say no, because my no is just as powerful as my yes. And now I'm saying no. Forget the terrible 2s, it's the terrible 8s, because now I know how to talk. And I'm telling you no. And it feels great, it feels wonderful. Then comes my grandmother with a bowl of soup, and she puts it right in front of me. Here you go, mijo. This soup will make you big and strong. And I go, no. But honey, this soup will make you big and strong like Popeye, like Superman. No. Now, mind you, at that moment, it's about nutrition. She wants to nurture me with the soup. She knows that soup is good for me. It's good for my body. It's good for my mind. It'll something that is I will get great benefit from. So she goes into her memory books, goes, okay, what helped me before to change that no into a yes? And she goes, here comes the plane. And I go, no, 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 no. And with every no I give, little by little, it stops being about nutrition and it starts being about control. I want that yes. I want that. So she decides to cross a threshold of respect. And she does it ever so innocent. And she says, Mijo, don't you know how many kids don't have anything to eat here in Mexico and around the world? And here you are wasting food. It's a sin to waste food. Mind you, I grew up Catholic, which means I don't want to be seen like a selfish child, let alone I don't want to be seen like a sinner. So I'll go, yes, Grandma, I'll eat the soup. And I begin to eat the soup. And I finish the bowl. And as I finish the bowl, she comes over and she says, that's my good boy. I got the reward. But here's the thing, ever so innocently, she got me to change my no into a yes. I subjugated my will. You can say that's the result of domestication. We subjugate our will to someone else's point of view. Now, here's the thing. Fast forward 30 plus years. I go to a Mexican restaurant and they give me a plate this big of food. They call it Mexican food. And halfway through, as I'm eating this, my body tells me the truth. I am full. But conscious or subconscious, I hear, it's a sin to waste food. Conscious or subconscious, I answer, yes, Grandma. And I continue to eat. And I polish off the plate. And I'm so stuffed, you're going to have to roll me out. But in that moment of clarity where my body told me the truth, that I am full, that I am nurtured, that there's no more physical space in my body, a belief, conscious or subconscious, overruled my no, and I subjugated myself. And it's subconscious only because I've done it so many times, it becomes an automatic yes. But at that moment, I go against myself because now I'm experiencing the consequences of what it is to overeat, to not listen to my body, and the pain and the consequences that come with that. And my grandmother is nowhere around. In fact, she passed away over 10 years ago. Here's the thing. We humans are the only beings that we know of that are able to self-domesticate, that we're able to continue to domesticate ourselves even after when our domesticator stops. Not because of time, I'll just go straight to the point. My grandmother only said that to me once in my life when I was 8 years old. But it continues to impact me all the rest of my life because I continue to say yes to it. Like I said before, we humans are the only beings who are able to self-domesticate. That's because we have a very special relationship within ourselves. My father put it this way, Miguel, if you're the voice that's talking inside your own mind when you're thinking, who is listening? And I said, I am. Oh, really? You're the one listening. Who's talking inside your own mind? And I answered, I am. And that's what we know as the individual dream, or you can call it the relationship between me and me, the relationship between my mind and my heart, or left hemisphere, right hemisphere, whichever way we want to put it. But it is that internal dialogue that is in us that forms the relationship within myself. If that relationship is in harmony, then all my relationships will be in harmony. But if that relationship is not in harmony, then all my relationships will also be in harmony. And the reason why it wouldn't be in harmony is because my mind is continuing to domesticate myself with every single one of the judgments I have ever said yes to. Which reminds me of the teaching of Siddhartha. When Siddhartha faces Mara underneath the Bodhi tree, and he is able to resist the temptation of the three daughters, Mara gets so mad and angry that he sends out his armies to destroy Siddhartha, and they shoot their arrows at him. Siddhartha looks at those arrows and decides that he's not going to I don't give him permission to hurt me, so he turns them into roses. He turns those arrows into roses, not giving them permission to hurt him. It is a moment where he's able to conquer Mara, which also reminds me of a phrase that Eleanor Roosevelt says. It's my favorite quote, which goes like this: "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Let me paraphrase that again. No one can make me feel inferior without my consent. How do I give consent? By agreeing with it, by saying yes to it. No one can domesticate me without my consent. Yes, someone in our life domesticated us. Parents, society, friends, exes. But ultimately, I'm the one who continued to say yes to it. I'm the one who continued to believe it. I'm the one who I've given those arrows permission to hit its target, me. And that's the moment of clarity. Yes, someone domesticated me. I can still think of all those people and all their names and all their faces, but they stopped domesticating us a long time ago. We continued to say yes, which means I used my mind as my active domesticator. In the Four Agreements, my father calls it the parasite, the judge, and the victim. That sense of imposing and subjugation that happens within us. We share that with everyone else, but it starts within us, the individual. My grandmother used to have this question that she asked throughout my apprenticeship, which was, do you use knowledge or does knowledge use you? And when I was 14 years old, I had no idea what that meant. But as time progressed, for the sake of time, when I'm so attached to my beliefs, or more importantly, when I'm domesticated by my beliefs, knowledge controls my yes and my no. It controls my will. It tells me who to be in relationship with, who to engage, what to do, whatever. Live my life. At that point, knowledge is in control of the work of art that is my life. But if I begin to answer that knowledge exists because of me, and it's my ally, it's the instrument I use to make a choice, but I'm the one making the choice, then I'm able to say that my life is my work of art because I'm the one saying yes. So you can say, in the Toltec tradition, there's nothing to learn but to unlearn, just to quote my brother Jose Luis, which is to let go of all our domesticated beliefs. Now, mind you, this is not in the book, but something I've learned since. We heal with our own permission. It's something I've learned from everyone I've ever begun to work with or helped with, is that we all heal with our own permission. And usually what prevents us from healing is our domesticated beliefs, whether we're a man or we're a woman, machismo or whatever. It's like, imagine a firefighter, a soldier, a police officer, a cholo, a gangster, both sides of that equation. They all have PTSD. A lot of them do, at least. But they will never admit it, because if they ever admit it, they fear that they'll be less of a man, they'll be less of a police officer or a warrior. They won't trust me. I'm going to lose this. I can't own up to it, so I'll pretend to be something I'm not. At that moment, they didn't give themselves permission to heal. I realized that when I was driving from Wimberley, Texas to San Antonio, Texas, a young woman was giving me a ride. And she was sharing with me her life story. And she was living my worst nightmare, which is she had lost her son earlier that year. And then all of a sudden, she began to berate herself, to judge herself. What kind of mother am I? What kind of mother lives her life, heals from the death of her own son? What kind of mother does that? And she began to judge herself and go down that downward spiral. I tried to say words to try to comfort her, to help her, but it was to no avail, because she was really hurting herself. But that's when she taught me that lesson, that life was already helping her heal by living life. But she had an image of what a mother is, and that wasn't giving her permission to heal. Wow. And it's kind of the similar things. Like, imagine you have a cut in your arm. If you give it some tender loving care and clean that wound up, if you leave it alone, little by little, a scab begins to grow and cover that whole area of the wound.
Mm-hmm.
If you leave it alone, little by little, that scab will get smaller and smaller and smaller until it falls off, showing new skin. Sometimes you'll have a scar, but mostly it's healed skin. You gave your body permission to heal. But let's say that scab is growing and you decide to scratch it. Scratch until it falls off and it bleeds again. You say, see, I haven't healed. Look, I'm bleeding. Mm. At that moment, you didn't give your body permission to heal. Mm. Well, here's the thing. Our emotional body heals in the same way our physical body does, with time and effort, also known as tender loving care. Usually the thing that stops us from healing is our domesticated beliefs, ideas, or that image by which we domesticate ourselves. In this case, my case, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. If something were to happen in my life, if I have some anxiety because my son has autism, my domesticated point of view will say, I'm not supposed to have anxiety. I'm Don Miguel Ruiz. And I'm going to suppress that image of myself, as that truth about myself, because it doesn't jive with the image of Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. in order to be a spiritual teacher and all that kind of thing. At that moment, I'm using that image of Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. to domesticate myself and to reject myself. Well, the truth is, I have anxiety. And that's the moment of clarity. Hello, my name is Miguel Angel Ruiz Jr. I do take things personal. I do make assumptions. Sometimes I'm not impeccable with the word. Sometimes I'm not skeptical at all. I'll buy a hook, line, and sinker. And sometimes I don't do my best. Just ask my wife. She is my witness. It is a moment where I stop pretending to be something I am not. And I accept myself just the way I am. And that's the mastery of self.
Yes.
This is who I am.
Absolutely. So to touch on one thing there, so I believe the foundation of where to begin to heal yourself, to master yourself, is that awareness of what is going on. Like, what are our thoughts? What are we attaching ourselves to? And you speak another thing besides domestication, you talk about attachments, and obviously wrote a book on the 5 levels of attachments. But talking about attachments, why is that so harmful as well, that stops us from living as in our truth or as our authentic self?
Sure. Well, an attachment is making something that's not a part of us by investing ourselves emotionally, energetically, intellectually, spiritually to something. Let's just say that I attach myself to this cup because it represents the state that my wife is from. You know, it says Utah, so I can define myself and attach myself. It represents my wife. I'm gonna always cherish this cup, but it has nothing to do with her. But I've invested myself and attached myself to this little cup in that way. An attachment is engaging a moment. And here's the thing: there's nothing wrong with an attachment. Something that I added in the Mastery of Self. There's nothing wrong with an attachment. In fact, it's something healthy when we engage a moment. What makes it unhealthy is that when the time comes to let go, we can't. You see, in life, we attach, detach, or you can say engage, disengage, engage, disengage. It's something quite healthy. But when the time comes to let go, we can't. What's going to happen? Who am I without this? Who am I without this cup? Who am I without my ring? Who am I without all these things? And all of a sudden we realize that we actually don't get attached to material objects. We get attached to the meaning, to what they define. So you can say we get attached to thoughts, to belief. And those are a little bit more harder to detach from than physical stuff, because there's no physical symbol or concepts. But when you realize that we actually get attached to the meaning of things, then all of a sudden, when we get attached to our relationship, is that we are using that relationship to say something about who we are. Who am I? Me being in a 17-year-long relationship with my wife, that says something about who I am, and I get attached to that. All of a sudden, it's no longer about my wife and who she is. It's about what meaning it brings to my life.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, that's what I'm attached to. And my wife cannot never say no to me, because if she ever does and she leaves me, what does that say about me? What will people think? And that's where it begins. Not so. We begin to no longer live our present moment, but we're holding on to something that no longer exists. My wife, she's free to say yes and no to me at any given moment in time. To set someone free means to let them be who they are. Every relationship exists for as long as you both say yes.
Mm.
Any given moment, she can change that yes into a no. To, to respect her is to respect her no, which is just as powerful as her yes. And the way I'm able to respect her free will is by starting to respect my own. My no is just as powerful as my yes. Which makes me realize that every relationship in my life exists for as long as we both say yes. And that I'm only able to control to the tips of my fingers. I don't control her will, and I don't control her perception. She does. And in turn, she doesn't control my will nor my perception. I do. And that's what makes us co-creators of the dream of us, of the relationship between she and I, which only exists for as long as we both say yes. When couples come and ask me for advice, I always ask the same question. Do you guys want to stay together? If they both say yes, the rest is easy, because that mutual yes is the motivator that gets you through a lot of the hurdles.
Mhm.
If you both say no, that's also easy, because you're both saying the truth. It becomes difficult if one says yes and the other one says no. At that moment, it becomes convoluted. To attach ourselves to a relationship is to begin to domesticate the other individual. Whoever's afraid of the no is the one who's going to domesticate the other, because I'm
That's
afraid
interesting.
of you saying no. And that's when an attachment in a relationship becomes a little bit, well, not so healthy,
Yeah.
because now we lose respect for the individual and we begin to domesticate them, or vice versa. Don't ever leave me. I'll do anything you want. I'll be whatever you want me to be. And at the moment, we subjugate our will as we let them impose their will upon us. Imposing and subjugation. Whoever domesticates the other is the one who controls the yes and no of a relationship. What does that have to do with attachment? Most of the arguments couples have is who's going to domesticate who, or what love should be, what is to be a man, what is to be a woman, and regardless of what form of relationship you are in. We begin with this moment of disrespect as we try our best to impose our will onto someone else. What makes us do this? Our attachment to our beliefs, to our domesticated beliefs. That judgment that we hear when we see ourselves in the mirror also gets represented and manifested in the arguments we have with our beloved, as we try to make the other person fit the image of what love is to us, or what we've known throughout our domestication that a relationship should be. And our partner should be doing this, they should be doing that, they should be doing this. And if they're not, that means they don't love me, or they better. And that's where that attachment begins to impact and corrupt our present, because we hold on to things that no longer are relevant in our life because it has nothing to do with this relationship. Kind of like holding on to past ways of being in relationship with our exes.
Yeah.
And thinking those same things will work in this relationship, completely blinding us that this new relationship is brand new and we've never experienced it before. Yet we're holding on to those old wounds that will impact and corrupt and infect our present, because we're not even aware that this relationship is new.
So that makes sense. Yeah, you probably just touched on one important fact in your book of the 7 secrets to happy, healthy relationships, because that's really profound of why certain relationships will crumble because of what you just talked about. So that I already know that's in the book. That has to be. So that's a little glimpse of that book. So speaking, you also mentioned in the book that the difference between attachment and domestication is that attachment doesn't always come from domestication, but domestication left unchecked always leads to attachment. So it's a very important, this awareness of where our beliefs are coming from, what domestication that might be existing from. And another thing you mentioned, the mastery of self is choosing to let go in order to be in control. And that is in control of ourself. So being all that you said with domestication and attachment and releasing that and letting go so that we could actually be conscious. I say this all the time, be conscious in my yeses, be conscious in my nos, being super aware of what I'm saying yes to and what I'm saying no to. That is it getting me closer to where I want to go? Is it coming from actually my true self? So being that these are the things that are kind of blocking us, how can we begin to strip that? I mean, what is your advice, or what steps should we take to be super aware and be conscious of the beliefs that we have and how to get rid of the ones that aren't serving us and then live authentically?
Sure.
There's a lot in that question. Sorry.
I'm going to do my very best. To be able to give scrutiny, the fifth agreement, be skeptical, but learn to listen. To me, to be skeptical is to hold back my yes and to hold back my no. When I do that, I'm able to break the cycle of the automatic yes and the automatic no, our domesticated behaviors, our subconscious behaviors. To be skeptical is not to go, la, 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 I can't listen, la, la, la. No, that's something else. Holding back my yes, holding back my no allows me to give scrutiny to what I believe, to what I say yes to. For example, one of the good things about being who I am is that I get to give lectures at, not just in front of my father, but at centers for spiritual living, churches, temples, synagogues. And I've been able to ask minister, rabbis, priests, and my father the same question. Is it a sin to waste food? And they all said, no, it is not. So that belief did not survive my scrutiny. When you listen, when you hold back your no and your yes and your no, you're able to once again listen and give scrutiny to the belief, is it truth or is it not? In this case, it didn't survive. So, Grandma, I forgive you. I understand why you did it because I have kids of my own. I totally understand where you get it. I'm tempted by the same thing myself. But Grandma, can you forgive me? I've been using your words to go against me all throughout your life, which we talked about before. The truth exists whether you believe in it or not. It's one of my favorite quotes from Neil deGrasse Tyson. The truth exists whether you believe in it or not. It doesn't need us for it to exist. A black hole was going to exist whether we can prove it existed or not. It's going to exist. In contrast, a belief only exists for as long as you say yes to it. As soon as you change that yes into a no, it ceases to exist, meaning it needs me for it to exist. It'll only exist for as long as I believe it, which means it's an illusion. The truth and a belief, if you're able to separate and see the difference between the two, you look back on everything you've believed in and realize what is the truth and what is not. And most of the time, the most difficult parts is the parts that I've identified myself, who am I without it? And that's the thing that really requires that the work to let go of. But once you become aware that certain beliefs are only there because we said yes to it, you see, our yes is so powerful. That three-letter word represents the moment where I use the energy that animates this body, that animates this mind to manifest something. My yes is the thing that makes me the infinite possibility because I'm alive at this very moment. And the same energy I use to move my arms and move my legs is exactly the same energy I use to create a thought, which is exactly the same energy I use to give word to my power. To be impeccable with the word is to know that I can use that intent to clean up my words. See what beliefs are just an illusion, that are not the truth. You see, the word perfection means something that is completely free of any flaw. Well, guess what? We define flaw via agreement. All those flaws that we see when we look in ourselves in the mirror are only there because we keep saying yes to it. There's no such thing as a flaw out there in the world, in the universe. Everything is perfect because it exists. But in our mind is where the flaw is. I'm too heavy, I'm too fat, I'm too bald. I'm saying yes to a definition that's constantly changing. The image of beauty has changed so much over the centuries. In fact, it's even changed in the last 20 years. It's continuously changing. Be thin, be fit, be fat. It's continuously changing. It was 100 years ago that to be thin was considered to be ugly, and a little bit heftier was considered to be beautiful. And that changed, and it'll continue to change, and change and change and change. You know, what was cool in the 90s no longer is cool now. Which means we are judging ourselves, rejecting ourselves with our defined idea of what a flaw is. And we become aware of it. We become aware. To be impeccable with the word is to not use the word to go against me. Since I use my intent to give power to my word, be impeccable with your intent, because it is you who gives power to your word. Now, mind you, I described this to my father, and my father says, yes, that's exactly what I meant. That's the amazing. Word, the intent, the energy that animates this body is what gives power to the word. But since you changed this agreement, let me change it one more time. Be impeccable with yourself. How do you know you're not being impeccable with the word? When you use it to reinforce your domesticated point of views. When are you being impeccable with the word? When you're using your word to heal yourself, to love yourself, to see yourself as you are. You see, conditional love only sees what it wants to see. But unconditional love is the willingness to see life as is. That's why when people say, can you actually have unconditional love in relationships? Yes. And the answer is the willingness to see the person you are in relationship with as they are right now. And it stems from being able to see yourself as you are right now. That's what unconditional love is. I'm the sum of every decision that I've ever made, but at the same time, I'm the youngest I will ever be. This is who I am. And the best way to let go of conditional love is to forgive ourselves for ever saying yes to it in the first place. To use that image of Siddhartha, to forgive ourselves for ever letting those arrows hit their targets. Because those arrows only hit me because of my permission, because I agreed with it.
Forgiveness is so important for healing. Gosh, I mean, like you said, I think that is one of the important steps to feel unconditional love for ourselves. You know, I mean, I was going to ask you, like, how do you get to a point where you could unconditionally love yourself? And I think you kind of said it is just forgiving ourselves and accepting that, yes, we all have flaws, and to see the humanness in somebody else and know that as you have flawed, they have flawed too, and accepting like they're just human. They're just, you know, being human, you know, and so that's a way to, I think, really ground yourself in this unconditional love, to see somebody as you are, as a flawed human being that is going through your own journey, their own journey, and just embracing what is. I do think it's a practice to live every day. And of course, that's why you share so much in your book, that it's a continuous practice. And even the Four Agreements, like you could read that book over and over, and highly recommend you do, because we will forget these things, because life is always throwing us different things that challenge us, and we've been shaped by our subconscious beliefs from such a young age that they will always pop up. So it's a practice. All this is, I believe, a practice. And you talk about, just to touch on one more thing, because there's so much more I could go into, but I don't want to take up all your morning, but you talk about masks. And I think, and when I say mask, mask. So masks, we all put on these masks, but there are, when you talk about it in the book, you talk about there are reasons we should put on masks, and that's to relate to others, or if you need to play this role because of, you shared an example, if your wife is sick and you need to now step in and take on more duties. So we put on these masks, but when a mask is put on and not let go, when we don't need it any longer, as you said, the attachment, then that's where it becomes a problem. So can you go a little deeper into these masks and the unhealthy way to, the way we should remove these masks that hide our true self?
So yes, so in our tradition, we talk a lot about mask, and what we know as mask is what we also know as identity. We have an identity of who we're supposed to be. Now, that slippery slope of putting on a mask or an identity is that we begin to use that identity as the model by which we domesticate ourselves. And you can say at first we put it on, it begins to subjugate us and then impose itself on us, and it controls who we are as we're trying to live up to that image. In my case, like I said before, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., I can put on the mask of Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., and the slippery slope is that I will begin to domesticate myself with it. The mask that most of us have, the identity, is the result of a lot of people projecting the image of who we think we are to them, and they domesticate us to it. As you can say, that mask of our identity is the result of our domestication. Example, let's just say that my wife, my mom, and my daughter, the three women in my life, are here. My mom is going to project son, or mijo in her case. Audrey is going to project papa, and my wife is going to project Miguel. My mom's been domesticating me all these years. An example, 2 years ago, she came to stay with us for the summer, and she got so mad. She got so angry. And the reason why she got so mad and angry at me is because I was doing the dishes and I was doing the laundry. No, my son does not do the laundry. He does not do the dishes. And she got, and I said, Mama, I'm sorry. No, in this house, we all do our share. If we see it, we take care of it. We all are responsible. We're, all hands on deck. We have a special needs son. My son has autism. So we all do the work. But when I was younger, I would not contest it. She said it, it was gold. It was a rule. And it projected. It was an image that she projected. Miguel Ruiz Jr. does not do laundry or does dishes. Nope. And I believed it. Like, that's the image. So I have that mask. My daughter, the first time I began to cut my hair really short, one day I came home with really, really short hair. She came up and she sees me and she says, Papa, no. Never again. No. Mind you, she's a rookie. She's learning how to domesticate me in the same way my wife does. She's more mature about it. They all three project a mask, and I allow that projected mask to domesticate me as I really want to become that which they see. Now, let's say that before I did all this work, I had this mask that was the sum of all that domestication. And one day it cracked and I began to do the work. And slowly but surely, in my own personal journey, I took my own mask off and began to see myself as I am. You can almost say that I took the image of conditional love away from me. And I began to see myself as I am. You can say this symbol right here represents the hard work that many people who are in a spiritual path do. I take off the mask as I stop domesticating myself. I no longer give myself permission to domesticate myself. Now, here's the thing. I don't live isolated in the world. I live in a community. I'm part of this every day, which means I'm surrounded by people who still project a mask onto me. My challenge, my temptation is to believe their image of who I am according to their point of view and domesticate myself with it. Because here's the thing. I am the constant in every relationship that I am in. And every relationship brings out a totally different element of me. My mom brings out an element of son to her. My wife brings out an element of husband to her, and father to my daughter. But at the same time, like, I am the same man, but all three of them see me dramatically different.
Mm-hmm.
As my father, as my brothers. My relationship with them is different. For example, I'm able to talk to one brother about our youth. I'm able to talk to my other brother, not about my youth, but of other things that he's interested in. Just like my friend. I have a friend who, him and I talk about working out and running races. He's a Boston qualified runner, so we talk about running. So we talk about that. And then I have my other friend who's not at all a physical activity guy, but he's really into music. So we talk about music. Every person in my life brings out a different part of me,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the interest I have in, and that's what creates relationships. Have you ever thrown a party where you invite everyone you know, family members, friends, coworkers, and all of a sudden everyone's kind of like, you have to relearn how to engage all of them because they all know a different part of you. I didn't know you were into this. I didn't know you were into that. And sometimes it's kind of weird having them all, and then it's you look at a family member, the family member seeing you interact with your friends, and like, man, I never saw that side of him, like, or her. You know, have you ever been in a party like that?
Yeah.
So it's fun to, sometimes it works out, we're able to gel with everyone, and sometimes it doesn't work out because they're not gelling with each other. It's convoluted. We put on a mask, and at one point we take it off. It's kind of like my teacher once teaching us about our son. It is our job to put a life vest on him. You know, he has special needs, but it's his job to take it off, and our job to let him do it. Someone projected a mask of who we thought we should be according to their point of view, and we believe them. But it's our job to outgrow that projection. It's our job to live our life, and we will outgrow it. If we hold on to that image for the sake of them, then we're pretending to be something we're not, and we're subjugating ourselves. But in the Toltec tradition, we know this as controlled folly. I know I can't control the folly, the craziness all around us, but I can control me. I am the only sober person in a party where everyone else is drunk. And everyone is going up and down their levels of awareness with each cup they take. And the reason why we're in this party is because everyone we know and love is here. That's the only reason why we're in this party. Our family, our friends, everyone is here. And some of them, imagine being in front of talking to two people. The person to the left has been nursing a drink for hours, which means they're barely at all tipsy, if at all. The other person has already opened their third or fourth bottle of wine and they're blacked out, but somehow they're still functioning. Everyone in the party is somewhere between these two and going up and down with every drink they drink or get sober by the drinks they stop having. And they go like that. Imagine that with everyone in your life. Everyone's in different stages of their awareness. My temptation, after I've done all this work to take off my mask and get to know myself as I really am, is to attach myself to one of those projected images and domesticate myself with it again. Every relationship will bring out a different element of me. And here's the thing, I can't control how they see me. I don't control their perception, but I control my own. And I respect how they see me. And I know that's not who I am. For example, my uncle, one day, like the first time, he's a neurosurgeon, and we were talking over dinner. It was me, my wife, with my uncle and my aunt. And it was the first conversation my uncles have had with me as an adult, which for me was a big thing. You know, they're seeing me as an adult. At one point, my uncle says to me, Miguel, there's a great book about relationships. You should read it. It's called The Four Agreements. You should read the book, but don't listen to your dad. In my case, that's kind of interesting because my dad happens to be the author of The Four Agreements, which to me shows you this. My uncle still sees my father as Dr. Miguel Ruiz and not Don Miguel Ruiz.
Hmm.
He still sees an image of my father that existed a long time ago, and he's still projecting that mask onto him, which goes to show even Don Miguel Ruiz Sr. still gets projected, and people still think he still is the way he used to be a long time ago, but he's no longer that person.
Hmm.
He's the result of all the work he's done, all the effort he's done. So I know people will project a mask of who Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. is, just like my daughter projects Papa, my mom projects son, and my wife projects Miguel. But the most important perception that matters in my life is my own. To know myself, this is who I am. Take off the mask and realize that the mask was only describe but a small portion of who I was or who I am. And there are many, many words, many identities and masks that describes the whole of me.
Hmm.
I'm a music fan. I'm a runner. I'm a kickboxer. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm an author. I'm a reader. I'm a lecturer. I'm a, and the list goes on and on and on and
Yes.
on.
Yeah.
But if I were only to define myself by one of them, there's no mask big enough to encapsulate the whole of who I am. So if I take off the mask and I see the whole of me, I'm a person that's continuously changing.
Mm-hmm. Accept that. That's beautiful. And I know one of the other things that I thought was really important in the book and mentioned a lot today is our triggers, that somebody will trigger something in us and it has to do with something we didn't like or something we experienced that we didn't like. And very often when you talked about these triggers, you mentioned that people are a mirror for us to see basically the way we react to somebody in anger, argument, whatever. It's because we are seeing something we don't like in ourselves. And I love how you talk about that, but we don't need to go into all that because there's so much. But I would love to know, because I want everybody to read your book, because there's so much in this to really understand what it looks like to master yourself. And I know just hearing you speak about this, you could tell that you have come to such a place where you have mastered yourself because you are letting go of everything. Like you said, you're unlearning. The Toltec tradition is all about unlearning what doesn't serve us and these beliefs that we have been attached to. So it's really beautiful. It's a short read. I probably went through it in a few days. You could probably go through it in a day even. So that's great. But I would love to know, just personally from you, what are some of the things you do in your days that serve your highest self?
Well, the very first thing when I wake up is I take care of my kids. I get them both ready for school. My wife and I together, we do that. You know, the alarm goes off and she goes downstairs and starts prepping their meals, and I go over and I still help my son in particular to get ready for the school day. And my mornings is filled with being in service with my family and loving them. From then on, I basically take care of my body with physical activity. Either I go for a run, kickbox, or read a book or listen to music. Sometimes I work in my books. But what I mostly do is that I enjoy my time with the people in my life. I enjoy my time with my children when in the mornings and the afternoons when they come back from school. After they leave, I get 15 or 20 minutes with my wife before she goes off to work. So we're both having coffee and talking. I
Beautiful.
cherish that very much. I I've learned not to take for granted the people in my life that are saying yes to me right now.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Everybody should hear that now, because that is something I think that we let slip away. And if anything, through the whole quarantine and COVID, I think that's one of the things a lot of people learned is what's really important for the right here, right now.
Yeah.
And second question, if there was one piece of advice you would like to leave with us, what would that be?
Well, the advice is enjoy everything in your life. Enjoy who you are at this very moment in time. You know, like we all will die, just like every relationship will end. But like they say in the Game of Thrones, what do you tell the angel of death? Not today. Today is not that day. Today, enjoy life saying yes to you, just like your loved ones are saying yes to you right now. Enjoy these things. Because when we accept the end of our mortality, of our own journey within ourselves, that every relationship will end, it is the thing that makes us appreciate the people in our life and prevents us from taking them for granted. And that's really it. Taking someone or taking life for granted is the thing that stops us from enjoying that present moment with them, that golden time, that love. When we take someone for granted is when we no longer see them as human beings. We no longer are present. We're somewhere in the future, somewhere in the past, and missing out on that time we come together.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much. This has been such a beautiful conversation, so much wisdom, of course, shared by you, Don Miguel. I appreciate you deeply. I absolutely respect your family's work, and I'll be interviewing your brother here shortly as well, which I can't wait. Again, thank you so much for everything you shared today and your time and your space.
Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate this opportunity. I hope you have fun and enjoy everything in life.
Amen. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.